The world's smartest engineers watched in silence as a 2-bar hypercar died in the middle of downtown, until a 13-year-old with a busted bike stepped forward and said, "I can fix it." Crowds laughed when the billionaire's car broke down, but they stopped when the poor black kid bent over the engine and brought it roaring back to life with nothing but a paperclip. The morning sun gleamed against the canyon of glass towers, painting downtown in blinding reflections as Graham Whitaker's hypercar prowled through traffic like a beast on a leash. The machine was his pride, a $2 million marvel of engineering, every curve sculpted, every system bleeding edge. Today, it wasn't just a car, it was his armor. In less than 40 minutes, he would stand before the investment board to secure the future of his company's autonomous technology, a deal that would redefine the industry. Every second mattered, every gesture calculated. Even the steady purr of the engine seemed to echo his confidence. He glanced at his Patek Philippe watch, the third time in 5 minutes. The minutes ticked too loudly in his mind. He accelerated slightly, threading through the morning rush. Pedestrians turned to look, some at the car, some at the man inside it. Graham had grown used to those looks. Billionaire, genius, disruptor. The world called him many things, but in his own mind he was a builder. He built companies, ideas, futures, and today he needed to build trust, fast. The first cough from the engine was almost delicate, like a polite throat clearing. Graham frowned, hands tightening on the wheel. Then came another, a sputter, a shudder. The smooth, predatory growl of the hypercar dissolved into a staccato wheeze. The dashboard exploded with warning lights, a rainbow of disaster flashing across the sleek digital display. "No, no, no," Graham muttered. He steered toward the curb, but the car fought him, lurching forward with jerks so violent they rattled his teeth. Smoke hissed from the hood vents, acrid and sharp like burning metal. He pressed the ignition once, twice, nothing. With one last convulsion, the engine died and silence fell, a humiliating silence pierced only by the chorus of horns from the cars piling up behind him. "Sir!" His assistant Marcus was already jogging up from the SUV trailing them. Marcus's usual composure cracked in the heat of panic, phone pressed to his ear. "I'm calling the tech team now, 45 minutes minimum." 45 minutes? Graham's voice was low, sharp, dangerous. "The presentation is in 38. Call a tow truck, call the police, call God himself if you have to. Just move this thing." But it was too late. Crowds had formed as if conjured from the city itself. Strangers pulled out phones, capturing every angle of the billionaire stranded in his monument to wealth. Laughter rippled from the sidewalks. Someone shouted, "Should have bought a Tesla, Whitaker." Another voice, "Hey genius, maybe it can drive itself to the mechanic." Graham climbed out of the car with as much dignity as a man could summon while standing beside a dead hypercar in the middle of Madison and Fifth. His Italian suit, flawless this morning, felt stifling now. Sweat beaded at his temples. He kept his jaw locked, refusing to give the crowd the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. And then, from the edge of the commotion, a boy appeared, thin, wiry, pushing a busted bike with a chain dangling loose. His sneakers were torn at the sides, patched with duct tape. His oversized Bulls jersey clung to his small frame, the fabric faded from too many washes. He moved through the crowd without apology, slipping between adults like he'd done it his whole life. His eyes, dark and sharp, locked on the smoking car. Jordan Thompson was 13. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be at school, or at least at Mr. Kim's corner store asking if there were deliveries to run. But machines had a way of calling to him, broken machines especially, and this one screamed for help. He studied the smoke, the rhythm of the warning lights that still pulsed faintly behind the windshield, the faint tang of scorched circuitry on the air. It was all a language, and he could read it as easily as breathing. "I can fix it," Jordan said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. The crowd stilled for a heartbeat before erupting in fresh laughter. A man in a business suit snorted. "What's the kid gonna do? Draw it back to life with crayons?" Someone else added, "Careful, boy. That's worth more than your whole neighborhood." Jordan ignored them. He always ignored them. Words were noise. Machines told the truth. He leaned closer to the open hood where Marcus had been peering helplessly. "Your thermal management system failed," Jordan said matter-of-factly. "Battery cooling loops clogged, overheated, triggered the failsafe, but the relay fried too. That's why nothing's coming back online." Marcus blinked, then turned to Graham in disbelief. "Sir, he can't possibly know." "You can smell it," Jordan continued, undeterred. "Different from regular burning, metallic, like when you leave a penny on a stove." He tapped the side of his head. "Relay's right behind the auxiliary pack. If I had something thin, like a paperclip, I could bridge it. Just enough to start the car and move it." The laughter faltered. A few people leaned forward, intrigued despite themselves. Graham studied the boy. Torn jeans, scuffed shoes, oil-stained hands. But the eyes, those weren't a child's eyes. They were precise, analytical, the eyes of someone who solved puzzles because the world never gave him anything intact. Marcus whispered urgently, "Sir, the liability." "What liability?" Graham cut him off. His voice was quiet, resolute. The decision was already made. "The car's dead anyway." He turned to the boy. "Go ahead, kid. Show us." Jordan didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a battered multi-tool, and stepped up to the engine. The crowd leaned in. Phones recorded. History waited. And then, as his small, steady hands worked with the focus of someone who'd been fixing broken things his entire life, the hypercar roared back to life. The crowd gasped. Applause broke out. Someone shouted, "Did that kid just fix a millionaire's car with a paperclip?" But Jordan was already packing his tools, ready to disappear back into the crowd, as if what he had done was nothing at all. The engine's roar still reverberated off the surrounding buildings when Jordan stepped back, wiped his hands on his jeans, and turned away as though nothing remarkable had happened. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were filming in silence now, capturing every detail. The billionaire in his silk tie staring at a kid whose bike was more rust than metal. "Wait," Graham said sharply, stepping out of the car. The word echoed across the street, halting Jordan in mid-step. Jordan turned just enough to look over his shoulder. "It'll hold for 20 minutes, he said flatly. "Long enough to get it somewhere safe. But the relay's fried. You'll need to replace it, and you should flush the coolant line. There's probably shavings in the loop. If you don't fix the cause, it'll happen again." Then he was gone, pushing his bike through the crowd, which now parted with something approaching respect. Marcus exhaled in disbelief. Who was that kid? Graham's eyes followed the boy until he disappeared around the corner. He wasn't just thinking about the car anymore. Something about the way the kid spoke, with certainty, not arrogance, lodged in his mind like a splinter. By the time they reached the office tower, the internet had already turned the incident into a storm. Graham's comms team was frantically texting him screenshots, memes comparing his two-on-the-lar car to a paperclip, headlines blaring, "Street Kid Saves Tech Billionaire's Day." In the quiet of his corner office, Graham replayed the video over and over. Every frame fascinated him. The boy didn't hesitate once. His hands moved like he'd been born to fix things. His face betrayed no fear, no awe of standing in front of a billionaire's broken machine. Only focus. "Find him," Graham said. Marcus looked up from his tablet. "Sir? Find that boy. I don't care how. Name, school, address, whatever it takes." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, the board meeting. Reschedule it." Marcus stared at him. "You canceled a meeting we've been preparing for 6 months. For this?" "For him," Graham said. His voice was quiet but firm. It took less than 24 hours. Technology that Graham had pioneered years ago now worked in his favor, cross-referenced video stills with school ID databases' public records. By the next evening, Graham knew Jordan Thompson's name, age, address, school attendance record, and the fact that he had no father listed on any official document and a mother who died when he was 7. Washington Park was a world away from downtown's steel and glass. Graham's sleek black SUV looked almost predatory as it rolled through streets pocked with potholes. Buildings leaned against each other like weary old men. A group of kids watched them from a corner stoop, their expressions unreadable. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked quietly from the driver's seat. "Yes." The apartment building was a relic from another century. The elevator was out of service, so Graham climbed 5 flights of creaking stairs, each one smelling faintly of old cooking oil and damp plaster. At apartment 5C, he knocked. A voice, sharp, cautious, called from the other side. "Who is it?" "My name is Graham Whitaker. I'd like to speak with Jordan." A pause, the sound of a chain sliding free. The door opened to reveal an elderly black woman with silver hair wrapped in a headscarf, her posture radiating the kind of dignity that comes from surviving more than her share of storms. "You're the rich man from the video," she said, her tone cool. "Yes, ma'am." "And you're here to offer my grandson a scholarship or a PR stunt?" "Neither." Graham kept his voice level. "I'm here because I think your grandson is extraordinary, and I want to see what he can do if someone gives him the right tools." Her eyes narrowed. She opened the door wider, but only slightly. "Jordan," she called over her shoulder. Jordan appeared, still wearing the Bulls jersey from the day before. He looked smaller in the doorway than he had in the street, but his expression was the same, calm, watchful, ready to bolt if necessary. Graham crouched slightly so he was eye level with the boy. I need to ask you something. How did you know what was wrong with my car? Jordan shrugged. It was obvious. Obvious? You were pushing it hard, right? The smoke color meant overheated electronics, not oil. The lights on your dash were out of sync. That means the relay failed, not the controller. Anyone could figure that out. Not anyone, Graham said softly. Jordan's fingers twitched like he wanted to get back to work on something. Look, if this is about money, we don't take charity. Grandma doesn't like handouts. It's not charity, Graham said. It's an opportunity. Come work in my lab for a week. Use my tools. Build something. If you impress my team, I'll give you your own workshop. Jordan's eyes flicked to his grandmother, who was studying Graham like a hawk. She didn't answer right away, but something passed between them. Finally, she said, 1 week, but I'll be checking on him every day. And if I see anything that feels wrong, we're done. Graham nodded. Fair enough. Jordan looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to trust this strange man from the other side of the city. Then he nodded once. Fine, he said, but I'm not putting on a show for anyone. I just want to build. Good, Graham replied, because that's exactly what I want too. And somewhere deep inside, he felt the first stirring of something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity that had nothing to do with profit and everything to do with possibility. The Monday morning sky was gray and heavy, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Jordan stood outside Whitaker Tower, a 60-story monument of steel and ambition, his old notebook clutched to his chest. He'd worn his cleanest jeans and a plain black t-shirt, but still felt like he'd stepped onto another planet as executives in tailored suits swept past him without so much as a glance. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble floors and digital art walls that shifted color as he walked past. His reflection looked too small, too out of place. Marcus appeared, immaculately dressed as always, and nodded approvingly. Mr. Thompson, right on time. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt endless, and when the doors opened, Jordan's breath caught. The reception area looked more like a museum than an office. Glass walls, towering shelves of patents framed like priceless artwork, a view of the entire city stretched out like a promise. This way, Marcus said, leading him past security doors into the heart of the lab. It was paradise. Rows of workbenches lined with precision tools, 3D printers humming in one corner, diagnostic rigs glowing softly. Engineers in crisp polo shirts moved with quiet efficiency, glancing at him with thinly veiled curiosity as he passed. At the center of it all stood a man with arms crossed, his expression somewhere between skepticism and irritation. Derek Harrison, lead systems engineer. His hair was clipped military short, his posture radiating authority. So, Derek said, his tone cool, you're the paperclip kid. Jordan bristled but stayed quiet. Derek gestured to a table where a battery array the size of a suitcase sat connected to wires and monitors. Here's your test. We've been trying to reduce the thermal buildup in this array by 30% without increasing the size of the cooling system or losing power output. We've tried 17 configurations. None worked. You have 1 week. Good luck. He turned and walked away, leaving Jordan staring at the problem alone. Jordan took a slow lap around the array, hands in his pockets, observing every angle. He opened his notebook and began sketching, muttering to himself, piecing together what he knew about heat transfer and energy discharge. By noon, word had spread through the building that the viral video kid was in the lab. Employees found excuses to walk past the glass wall, whispering, snapping photos. Jordan ignored them all. He'd dismantled part of the cooling system, laying out components like puzzle pieces. Maya Patel appeared at his side around 2 o'clock. She was younger than the other engineers, her dark hair tied back, eyes bright with curiosity. You need anything? Food? Water? Jordan blinked up at her as if remembering where he was. Do you have any thermal paste? The good kind, not the cheap stuff. Maya smiled despite herself. Yeah, I'll get it. She hesitated before adding, you know Derek set you up to fail, right? This problem might actually be impossible with the current tech. Jordan shrugged, already turning back to his work. Everything's impossible until it isn't. By Wednesday, he'd built 3 prototypes, each one failing in different ways. The first overheated so fast it tripped the failsafe in under 5 minutes. The second stayed cool but delivered only half the required power. The third blew a fuse so violently it filled the lab with smoke, triggering the fire suppression system and drenching Jordan from head to toe. He sat on the floor, soaked, surrounded by failure, his notebook dripping ink. For the first time, doubt crept in. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe this problem couldn't be solved. Graham found him like that later, sitting cross-legged on the wet floor. Rough day? He asked gently. Jordan didn't look up. I can't fix it. Graham crouched beside him. You fixed my car. That was different. I knew what was wrong. This This is a wall I can't get past. Graham's voice softened. When I was 19, I blew up my first prototype computer. Lost 6 months of work. My professor told me I'd never make it as an engineer. I almost believed him. Almost. Jordan glanced up. What did you do? I built another one, Graham said simply. Better, stronger, and then another after that. Every failure taught me something I didn't know before. Jordan stared at his notebook, the ink-smeared pages a battlefield of ideas. Slowly he stood. Then I guess I need to fail better. That night, he didn't go home. He stayed in the lab until the city lights outside dimmed to early morning gray, stripping the array down to its core and rebuilding it from scratch. But instead of trying to fight the heat after it was made, he changed the way the batteries discharged in the first place, cascading the energy through multiple cells so no single one bore the full load. By dawn, he had a prototype ready. His hands shook as he connected it to the monitors. He took a deep breath, hit the switch, and watched the temperature readings. 5 minutes, still stable. 10 minutes, holding. 20 minutes. The temperature curve was flatter than any previous attempt. Jordan grinned, exhausted but electric. It worked. When the engineers arrived that morning, they found the boy asleep on the workbench, his head resting beside a running prototype that was performing better than anything they'd built in months. When Jordan woke, the lab was already buzzing. Engineers gathered around the running prototype, whispering like parishioners at a miracle. The temperature readings were steady, the power output perfect. Maya leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a rare smile on her face. "Congratulations, kid," she said. "You just did what we couldn't do in 3 months." Jordan rubbed the sleep from his eyes. "It's not perfect yet, needs refining." Derek appeared then, his expression unreadable. He circled the table slowly, eyes scanning Jordan's work. For a moment, Jordan thought he saw respect flicker there. Then Derek's mouth twisted into something closer to a smirk. "Impressive," he said flatly. "But you got lucky. We'll see how it holds up under full stress testing." It did hold up, better than anyone expected. Within hours, Graham was being briefed, and by afternoon, he was standing in the lab, grinning like a man who had just seen the future. "This changes everything," he said, looking at Jordan. "We can cut cooling costs by 30% across the board. I'm presenting this to the investors next week." Jordan's chest swelled. For the first time, he felt not just like a kid who'd gotten lucky with a paperclip, but like someone whose work mattered. But not everyone was celebrating. That night, long after Jordan had gone home, Derek sat in his office staring at the simulation data. The kid's design wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. And if Graham made Jordan the face of it, Derek's years of experience, his authority, his entire identity as the lead engineer would mean nothing. He made a decision. The next morning, Jordan arrived to find the lab strangely quiet. Maya was waiting for him, her expression tense. "Your prototype's gone," she said. "What?" Derek logged it for extended testing and moved it to a secure lab. Jordan stormed down the hall, notebook in hand, until he found Derek in front of a bank of monitors. "Where's my array?" "It's not your array," Derek said coolly. "It belongs to Whitaker Industries now. You built it here using our equipment under our supervision. Standard IP policy." Jordan's jaw clenched. "Then why lock me out?" Derek leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Because you're not ready. You had a lucky idea, Thompson. But ideas are worthless without real engineers to make them safe. You want to play in my lab? Then you play by my rules." Jordan left without a word, but inside, he was burning. That night, he rebuilt the prototype from memory, piece by piece, using scrap materials and salvaged components. He wasn't just proving Derek wrong now, he was proving he belonged. 2 days later, the smear campaign began. A popular tech blog published leaked documents claiming Jordan had been a PR stunt all along, that the design was Graham's team's work, and Jordan had merely been chosen as the face of it for a feel-good story. The article included emails, timestamps, even design files that appeared to predate Jordan's first day in the lab. Within hours, the internet turned. Paperclip kit exposed, trended on Twitter. Talk shows debated whether Graham had orchestrated the entire hypercar incident for publicity. Comment sections were full of vitriol. Knew it was fake. Just another rich guy using a poor kid to boost his stock. This is why you don't worship children. Jordan sat in the lab staring at his phone, the words blurring. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Maya slammed her laptop shut. "This is garbage, completely fabricated." "No one cares," Jordan said quietly. "They want to believe I'm a fraud. That's easier than believing someone like me could do something like this." When Graham found him that evening, Jordan was sitting on the floor against the workbench, notebook clutched in his lap. "Don't give up on me now," Graham said softly. "I'm not giving up," Jordan said, his voice flat. "I'm just tired of proving I exist." Graham crouched beside him. "The board thinks we should cut ties, quietly, protect the company." Jordan looked up sharply. "And you?" "I told them no," Graham said. "You're not a liability. You're the reason we exist." But the pressure didn't stop. Reporters started showing up outside Jordan's building. Kids at school whispered behind his back, some accusing him of faking everything, others asking for autographs like he was some kind of sideshow. And then came the sabotage. The night before Graham's investor presentation, Jordan's rebuilt prototype failed catastrophically. Not because of a design flaw. He could tell immediately that someone had tampered with the wiring, crossing connections that would overload the cells. He found Derek in the lab minutes later. "You did this." Derek didn't even deny it. "Better it fails here than in front of the board. I'm saving you from humiliation." "You're saving yourself," Jordan snapped, "because if I succeed, you're not the smartest man in the room anymore." Derek's expression hardened. "This isn't about you, kid. It's about protecting this company from being a punchline." Jordan turned and walked away, but his hands were shaking with fury. That night, Miss Loretta found him at the kitchen table, pages of his notebook spread around him like shrapnel. "Baby," she said gently, "you've been fighting every day since you were old enough to hold a wrench. But there's a difference between fighting to win and fighting to survive. Which one are you doing now?" Jordan stared at the page in front of him, then quietly began to sketch again. The next morning, Graham's assistant found Jordan asleep on the kitchen floor, notebook open to a brand new design. "Tell Mr. Whitaker," Jordan said, standing and rubbing his eyes, "I'll be at the investor meeting." When Graham walked into the boardroom that afternoon, Jordan was already there, setting up the prototype. Derek sat at the far end of the table, arms crossed. "This is insane," Derek muttered. "This," Graham said, his voice cool, "is necessary." The room fell silent as Jordan began connecting wires. His hands were steady, his face set with a determination that seemed older than his years. "Start it up," Graham said. Jordan hit the switch. The prototype hummed to life, perfect, stable, undeniable. For a moment, there was only silence. Then slowly, one board member began to clap. And Jordan, for the first time in weeks, allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The International Tech Expo was a cathedral of glass and light, buzzing with the kind of energy that could make or break reputations overnight. Every major player in the industry was there. Investors, journalists, competitors, influencers with millions of followers. The air was thick with expectation, and in the center of it all, Graham's company had a prime stage slot. Jordan stood backstage, the hum of the crowd beyond the curtain making his stomach twist. He wore the suit Graham had bought him, one that fit just well enough to make him look older, but not old enough to hide the fact that he was just 13. His notebook was in his hand, its worn cover smudged with oil and graphite. Maya found him pacing, his jaw tight. "You okay?" she asked softly. "No," Jordan admitted, "but I'm going to do it anyway." "Good," Maya said, and for a moment her proud smile looked like sunlight through storm clouds. The stage manager waved them forward. The lights dimmed. Graham stepped out first, applause rising as cameras flashed. "3 weeks ago," Graham began, "I stood in a downtown intersection, helpless, as my hypercar failed, and then a young man with nothing but a paperclip brought it back to life. Today, that same young man is going to show you something that will change the future of energy efficiency." He stepped aside and gestured toward the curtain. Jordan walked out to scattered applause, the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing down on him. He reached the microphone, which suddenly seemed too tall, and before he could speak, a voice rang out from the crowd. "Is it true you stole the designs?" The words hit the room like a slap. He found Derek in the lab minutes later. "You did this." Derek didn't even deny it. "Better it fails here than in front of the board. I'm saving you from humiliation." "You're saving yourself," Jordan snapped, "because if I succeed, you're not the smartest man in the room anymore." Derek's expression hardened. "This isn't about you, kid. It's about protecting this company from being a punchline." Jordan turned and walked away, but his hands were shaking with fury. That night, Miss Loretta found him at the kitchen table, pages of his notebook spread around him like shrapnel. "Baby," she said gently, "you've been fighting every day since you were old enough to hold a wrench. But there's a difference between fighting to win and fighting to survive. Which one are you doing now?" Jordan stared at the page in front of him, then quietly began to sketch again. The next morning, Graham's assistant found Jordan asleep on the kitchen floor, notebook open to a brand new design. "Tell Mr. Whitaker," Jordan said, standing and rubbing his eyes. "I'll be at the investor meeting." When Graham walked into the boardroom that afternoon, Jordan was already there, setting up the prototype. Derek sat at the far end of the table, arms crossed. "This is insane," Derek muttered. "This," Graham said, his voice cool, "is necessary." The room fell silent as Jordan began connecting wires. His hands were steady, his face set with a determination that seemed older than his years. "Start it up," Graham said. Jordan hit the switch. The prototype hummed to life, perfect, stable, undeniable. For a moment, there was only silence. Then slowly, one board member began to clap. And Jordan, for the first time in weeks, allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The International Tech Expo was a cathedral of glass and light, buzzing with the kind of energy that could make or break reputations overnight. Every major player in the industry was there: investors, journalists, competitors, influencers with millions of followers. The air was thick with expectation, and in the center of it all, Graham's company had a prime stage slot. Jordan stood backstage, the hum of the crowd beyond the curtain making his stomach twist. He wore the suit Graham had bought him, one that fit just well enough to make him look older, but not old enough to hide the fact that he was just 13. His notebook was in his hand, its worn cover smudged with oil and graphite. Maya found him pacing, his jaw tight. "You okay?" she asked softly. "No," Jordan admitted, "but I'm going to do it anyway." "Good," Maya said, and for a moment her proud smile looked like sunlight through storm clouds. The stage manager waved them forward. The lights dimmed. Graham stepped out first, applause rising as cameras flashed. "3 weeks ago," Graham began, "I stood in a downtown intersection, helpless as my hypercar failed, and then a young man with nothing but a paperclip brought it back to life. Today, that same young man is going to show you something that will change the future of energy efficiency." He stepped aside and gestured toward the curtain. Jordan walked out to scattered applause, the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing down on him. He reached the microphone, which suddenly seemed too tall, and before he could speak, a voice rang out from the crowd. "Is it true you stole the designs?" The words hit the room like a slap. Reporters raised their phones higher, hungry for drama. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Somewhere near the back, Jordan saw Derek sitting stiffly, his face smug, as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Graham stepped forward, ready to shut it down, but Jordan held up a hand. "My name is Jordan Thompson," he said, his voice clear despite the hammering of his heart. "I'm 13 years old. I live with my grandmother in a 5th-floor walk-up where the heat doesn't always work in the winter. I learned everything I know about engineering from library books and YouTube videos, and yes, I built this." He held up his notebook. "This is every design I've ever made, going back 2 years. Every idea, every failure, every breakthrough, dated, documented. Not because I ever thought I'd need to prove it, but because my mom taught me to write everything down. She said paper remembers when people don't." He flipped to a page dated 18 months ago, showing the earliest sketch of the cascade discharge system. "This was before I ever met Mr. Whitaker, before I'd ever set foot in this building, before anyone thought I could do anything but ride my busted bike around the neighborhood. You want to know if I stole this? I couldn't have, because the designs they say I stole wouldn't even work." He turned toward the prototype behind him, his fingers steady as he powered it on. "This works because it doesn't think in straight lines. It thinks in circles, like I do, like the kids in my neighborhood do when we have to figure out how to make a broken thing run one more week because we can't afford new parts. It comes from necessity, not privilege, from lived experience, not just theory." The array hummed to life, its monitors showing temperature curves flatter than anything the industry had ever seen. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then someone, no one ever knew who, began to clap. It spread, slow at first, then faster, until the entire hall was on its feet. But Jordan wasn't done. He turned back to the crowd. "Some of you think I'm too young to be here. Some of you think I'm too poor, too uneducated, too black to have built this. You can keep thinking that if you want, but while you're doubting me, this is running, and it's going to keep running." The applause became thunderous. Graham stepped forward, pride shining on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the future of energy." Cameras flashed like lightning. Investors surged forward, but even as the room celebrated, Jordan's eyes found Derek's in the back row. Derek looked pale, furious. Later that night, as the expo buzz filled every newsfeed, the next strike came. Social media exploded with a new leak. Grainy security footage that seemed to show Jordan sneaking into the lab weeks before he was officially allowed there. The timestamp suggested he had stolen designs from the company's servers. The narrative turned vicious. Prodigy or thief? Headlines screamed. The same crowd that had just applauded him now tore him apart online. Jordan watched the video in silence, then shut off his phone. "This is Caldwell," Graham said grimly, pacing his office. "He's using Derek to destroy you. And me. My legal team is on it." Jordan shook his head. "No, let me handle it." "What are you going to do?" Maya asked. "Show them the truth," Jordan said. That night, from his grandmother's kitchen table, Jordan went live on Instagram. Within minutes, tens of thousands of people were watching. "You've seen the videos," he said, notebook open in front of him. "You've read the articles, so let me show you something they can't fake." He flipped through page after page of his notebooks, showing crude sketches from when he was 10, receipts for parts he'd bought with pocket money, screenshots of online courses he'd taken, all with timestamps. "This is my work," he said, voice hardening. "Not stolen, earned. You can believe me or not, but I'm not going to stop building because someone's scared of what I can do." By the time the live stream ended, it had been shared 500,000 times. Support poured in from engineers, teachers, even celebrities. Hashtags trended. Hashtag let Jordan build. The next morning, Derek was forced to appear on a news broadcast to clarify his allegations. The evidence against him was mounting. Caldwell's legal department went silent, and Jordan, exhausted but standing taller than ever, went back to the lab and picked up a wrench. The world had seen Jordan fight, but it had never seen him win on his own terms. That was about to change. 2 weeks after the live stream that turned public opinion back in his favor, Jordan was scheduled to unveil his newest project, a clean energy bike engine, at a community event in Washington Park. This wasn't a corporate demo or an investor pitch. This was for the kids who had grown up like him, who needed to see that brilliance wasn't something reserved for glossy tech campuses and Ivy League graduates. But when Jordan arrived that morning, the Spark room was chaos. The prototype sat on the workbench, wires dangling, calibration data wiped. Someone had been there. Someone had sabotaged it. Maya was already there, her face pale. "This isn't random," she said. "They wanted you to fail in front of your own neighborhood." Jordan stared at the engine, fury rising. "Then we rebuild," he said quietly. For 3 hours, the Spark room became a battlefield of determination. Jordan worked like a surgeon, recalibrating every connection, his hands moving so fast they blurred. Kids from the neighborhood pitched in, holding flashlights, fetching tools. One little girl wiped sweat from Jordan's forehead with the hem of her shirt. "You don't have to do this today," Graham said, arriving with Marcus and a small security team. "We can reschedule." "No," Jordan interrupted. "If I run from this, I'm telling every kid out there that sabotage works, that the people trying to shut them down are stronger than the ones trying to lift them up." By 2:00 p.m., the community center was overflowing. Parents, teachers, neighborhood elders, local press. A few protesters stood outside holding signs reading, "Fake Prodigy," Caldwell's last attempt at controlling the narrative. Jordan stood before the crowd, his Bulls jersey clean but worn, his notebook tucked under his arm. His voice, when it came, carried through the room with a weight that belied his age. "My name is Jordan Thompson," he began. "Some of you know me as the kid who fixed a billionaire's car. Some of you know me as the kid they tried to tear down. Today, I want you to know me as what I've always been, a builder." He held up his notebook, not to show designs this time, but page after page of failures, crumpled drawings taped back together, ideas scribbled out, equations that went nowhere. "Thieves don't fail this much," he said, his voice rising. "They take what already works, but creators, we fail until we don't." Then he turned to the engine and flipped the switch. For one terrifying moment, nothing happened. The room held its breath. And then, a soft, perfect hum. The engine spun with a sound that was almost musical. The monitors lit up, showing a 45% improvement in energy efficiency, even higher than expected. The room erupted. Kids cheered. Parents cried. Someone began to chant Jordan's name, but Jordan wasn't finished. He turned toward the cameras at the back, his eyes like steel. "Mr. Harrison," he called, his voice echoing, "you say I stole this. Come show us. Point to one part, one line of code, one bolt that matches your supposed designs." The crowd turned as Derek, who had slipped in unnoticed, froze under the spotlight of attention. He stepped forward reluctantly, his face a mask of fury, and examined the engine. His silence was deafening. "Can't find it?" Jordan pressed. "That's because it isn't yours. It never was." Maya stepped forward then, holding up a flash drive. "And just in case anyone still thinks this was a misunderstanding, we have emails. Emails between Caldwell and Harrison planning to frame Jordan, forge documents, and destroy his reputation. Gasps rippled through the room. The press surged forward. Within minutes, the files were online. By evening, federal investigators had opened a case against Caldwell and Derek for corporate sabotage and fraud. Caldwell's stock plummeted overnight, erasing billions from his empire. Derek was arrested within 48 hours. But Jordan didn't stay to watch the fallout. After the crowd dispersed, he stood alone in the Spark Room, staring at the photo of his mother he'd pinned to the back wall. Miss Loretta rolled in quietly, still recovering from surgery, and watched him for a long moment before speaking. "You did it, baby," she said softly. Jordan shook his head. "I just survived." "No," she corrected gently. "You built something that will outlive you. That's more than survival. That's legacy." Her words stayed with him in the weeks that followed. Load as the Spark Room transformed from a single workshop to a movement. Other cities called, asking for help building their own. Donations poured in from all over the world, some small, some massive. Graham's board, seeing the public rally behind Jordan, voted unanimously to back the expansion. And then came the moment Jordan hadn't seen coming. Graham called him into his office one quiet afternoon. On the desk was a stack of legal papers. "This," Graham said, tapping them, "is the patent for the Cascade discharge system. It's worth hundreds of millions." Jordan frowned. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I'm signing it over to you," Graham said. Jordan stared at him. "Why?" "Because you built it," Graham said simply. "Because the world tried to take it from you and you fought to keep it. And because I think you'll know what to do with it better than I will." Jordan looked at the papers for a long time, then slid them back across the desk. "Put it in the Spark Room's name," he said. "Every dollar it earns funds more centers, more kids, more chances." Graham smiled slowly. "You realize what you're giving up?" Jordan nodded. "It was never about the money. It was about making sure kids like me never have to prove they deserve to build." Months later, on a cold December morning, Jordan stood in front of the original Spark Room. It was now one of 10 across the country. Inside, dozens of kids worked on projects, water filters, solar panels, homemade robots. A girl about 9 tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Jordan, my circuit won't work." Jordan knelt beside her, guiding her hands gently. "It's not failure," he said softly. "It's information. Now we know where to make it stronger." When the connection finally lit up the small LED, the girl gasped with delight. "That," Jordan said, smiling for the first time in weeks, "is what changing the world feels like. Small, quiet, but absolutely electric." That night, Jordan climbed to the roof and looked out over Chicago, the same city that had doubted him, mocked him, and finally cheered for him. The skyline glittered like a circuit board. Miss Loretta joined him with 2 mugs of tea. "You've done well, baby," she said. Jordan nodded slowly. "I built something that builds, that's enough." But as he looked out over the city, he felt the spark inside him ignite again. "Maybe," he said, "it's just the beginning." Somewhere below, a car horn echoed through the streets. Somewhere, something was broken, and Jordan, notebook in hand, was ready to fix it.